This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to thank you for joining us on a very special edition of the show. Jesperson here with Hicks, and in just a moment, one of our favorite people on planet Earth. She has been barred from speaking with us. We're being dramatic, but the duties of her role as a senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada prevented Supriya Dwivedi from making her regular appearances right here on Real Talk. Well, of course, with Justin Trudeau's resignation, Mark Carney swearing in as Canada's 24th Prime Minister, during, or even following, I should say, our most recent episode of Real Talk. We're back at it, and we're thrilled to welcome Supriya to this show. In just a quick second, we've got a million things to talk about. They're happening right here in Canada. They're happening in the United States. Canada's new Prime Minister is over in Europe right now, strengthening ties with a couple of those countries, France and Britain in particular, for obvious reasons. The carbon tax has been axed, or has it? There seems to be some disagreement on that, and we're all waiting for an election call. This is going to be a big year here on the show, a big week, and why don't we start it off with a big episode, which is being made possible by our friends at Alberta's top online real estate school. You can find them at relo.ca. That's RELO.ca, where better real estate training starts. If you woke up this morning with a pit in your stomach because, quite frankly, you can't stand where you're working right now, they don't appreciate you, you haven't had a raise in years, and you don't even feel like you're doing something you want to do. You're not helping people, you're not laughing, you're not making new friends or feeling inspired at all, and then you're looking at your friends that are working in real estate and you go, they're on to something. Check out Relo. Figure out how you can get licensed easily with clearly explained concepts, helpful instruction from people who have been there. You'll save on costs with their economical course bundles, and then you'll get support and business tips through their one-of-a-kind setup. It's the best of both worlds with Relo. Learn more on the website. When you're signing up for the Alberta Residential or the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundles, make sure you use the promo code Ryan100. It'll knock $100 off each of those. That's Ryan100 when you get started today at Relo.ca. Well, of course, she's a longtime broadcaster, a longtime radio host and television personality, a political pundit who you've read in the major publications across the country. She's been a good friend of mine for many years, and most recently she served as a senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada. We're thrilled to welcome back to the show, Supriya Dwivedi. My friend, it's nice to see your face. Thanks for making time for us. We're hearing a bit of an echo. Johnny's going to get the echo figured out, and then we'll bring Supriya on. See, guys, it's been a little while since we've hung out here, so things are a little bit rusty, but we're going to figure it out. Of course, I've got a lot that I want to talk to Supriya about, and I can look into our Real Talk live chat right now, powered by Park Power. It's amazing to see so many of you already at it, joining us on 7 different platforms. You know, you can chime in live on X right now. You can watch us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You know that. I know we'll have people watching us on LinkedIn today as well, and I know that there's a lot of people here that are excited to see Supriya here, including Cactus Sheriff, who's very excited about it, Sharon saying the same thing, and others going, Supriya, this is great. Of course, Supriya's been flying on the plane with the Prime Minister. She's been figuring things out, and then she's seen it all. She's been behind the scenes through the decision for Justin Trudeau to hang him out and to pave the way for that leadership run. And of course, then she's been watching, not involved, but watching as Liberal frontrunners fought it out for that office. Of course, Mark Carney, we don't have to tell you, winning that and swearing in as Prime Minister of Canada, along with his new cabinet, a pared down cabinet, a focused cabinet, an election time cabinet. That was just a couple of days ago on Friday. We've already got some responses from real talkers across the country. In fact, we're taking a look at that new cabinet and what it means. We're expecting an election call probably at the latest on March 23rd. That would be the day before that prorogation of Parliament would end. You know, they've got to go back, right? The 24th is the deadline, and Carney probably, you have to assume, wants to trigger an election, wants to call an election before it's out of his hands, before everybody else, his opposition in Parliament, forces him to do that. We got an email from John. John watches the show from Windsor. We sure appreciate that. John, in Nova Scotia, as a matter of fact. And John writes in to talk@ryanjesperson.com. This on Saturday. We appreciate those of you that are thinking of us or catching up on our episodes through the weekend. John says, greetings to my fellow Real Talkers from Nova Scotia. He says, I keep up with Alberta news through Real Talk, and I just caught your roundtable on ag and tariffs. Of course, that was our Real Talk Roundtable in partnership with our friends at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. If you missed that, make sure you check it out. That was our March 14th episode. A good one with Dave Solverson, who's the past president of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. Andre Harp joined us from Alberta Canola, so we got that perspective. And then Ryan Coppathorne, he's a fourth-generation rancher. He's also the founder of Cows in Control. They do basically financial and risk management advisory for his fellow ag producers. And then Shauna Feth sitting anchor on that panel. She's the president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. So we got into a great conversation. Encourage you to check it out. Probably the biggest takeaway from that is how badly Donald Trump right now is screwing American farmers, not Canadian farmers right now. Could get bad for them. Probably will get bad for everybody as we continue our talk about tariffs. I know some of you are sick of it, but we're following those stories. But the real story, the real takeaway from that that I realized is how Trump's policies in particular, with Elon Musk pulling the plug on a lot of that U.S. aid, is how that's impacting American farmers who, of course, grow many of those grains, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you check out the episode. So John was watching it. He said, I caught your roundtable on ag and tariffs. He says, I also note that the new federal minister of agriculture and rural development is Cody Bloys. He says he's my MP out in Nova Scotia. Says, and I've worked closely with him over the past few years, and I'm sure that there may be some concerns in Western Canada about an ag minister based in Nova Scotia. He says, but he does represent a largely rural constituency in the breadbasket of the Maritimes, says the Annapolis Valley. Cody's a bright young lawyer, active in the community, and he seems to represent us well. Says there may not be time before the next election, says John, but your audience may find it interesting to hear how Cody's going to best represent the Western Canadian agricultural community. I love that. A guest suggestion from John, who's checking in and giving us his firsthand perspective on Canada's new federal minister of agriculture. We love when you take the time to write into the show and let us know what you think about some of the things that you're seeing happening around you, how the news around you is affecting you personally. And we always tell you, and we mean it, that when you take the time to let us know your personal insights on something that's impacting you directly, it gives us a better sense of how a big issue can land with the audience. It helps us better understand the relevance of it. It's awesome to see Roy's Place checking in on X, watching us live on Twitter this morning, and those of you that are joining us on YouTube as well. We're still working on getting Supriya Dwivedi figured out, so we're going to get to that interview in just a quick second. Real Talkers, bear with me. If we get this out of the way, it'll be less interruptions when we talk to Supriya. So let me remind you, this morning and today, if you're catching this episode on the day that we're doing it, our friends at Freeland Brothers, this is the 17th of March. Of course, this is St. Patrick's Day, and our friends at Freeland Brothers have a big meat sale going on right now. So I'm just going to jump into, Johnny, give me my music right now. It's the St. Patty's Day 20% off meat sale that's happening March 17th and March 17th only in the butcher shop at Freeland Brothers. This is 20% off everything in the butcher shop. 20% off absolutely everything. You can learn more on their website by checking out the link at friesen.com. Or, if you like, just pop into one of the 16 locations across the province. That's 20% off everything in the butcher shop at Freeland Brothers as they celebrate St. Paddy's Day today on this March 17th. Our friends at Athabasca University reminding you that their world-class accredited online degrees and courses are designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. Athabasca University is structured so you can program your courses at your own pace. And of course, keeping in mind that your only commute is to your device, which is absolutely perfect. There's no brick and mortar hurdle standing in the way if you're living rural, if you're living remote, if you're living out of country. AU could be a perfect fit. They offer transfer credits. They've got financial awards available. You can learn more about that application process by checking out how AU works on their website. That's athabascau.ca. I'm very excited to be running into a lot of you Real Talkers today. It's the You Can Comedy Nights, and we've been telling you they've been running through the month of March. Well, tonight on the 17th, we're going to be at Rick Bronson's comic strip in West Edmonton Mall. I'm going to be there. I'm expecting to see some Real Talkers there. You've been emailing in telling us you're going to be there. I'm hosting a table, and I know many of you are as well, in support of UCAN Youth Services. They're doing amazing work with young adults aged 18 to 24 who are just looking for an opportunity. Quite frankly, they've had some, challenges standing in their way, but they've got bright futures. If you check out ucan.ca, you can learn more about their programs, including the Verto Project. The Verto is Latin for turnaround or change. It's a 20-week pre-employment program that assists young people between the ages of 18 and 24 transition out of harm's way and back into school or into the workforce. Now, this is an opportunity as well for those of you that are employers bringing talent in at entry-level positions. UCAN Youth Services is graduating these Verto participants through the year with the entry-level job skills that you're looking for as an employer. It could be a perfect fit. UCAN's got partnerships with employers across the Metro Edmonton region. You can get in touch with them today, learn more about what UCAN Youth Services is doing and why it's so significant across the province of Alberta by visiting their website. That's ucan.ca. And a shout out to our friends at Complete Care Restoration. I was telling you we ran into them just the other day here in the Mercer Warehouse building. It's because somebody that works in this building with us, a 110-year-old warehouse, saw the craftsmanship of our build, of our studio, and they're going to hire Complete Care Restoration to do their studio as well. How cool is that? Nothing more powerful than a referral from somebody who sees the quality craftsmanship. We recommend it with 2 thumbs up. So whether it's a renovation that you're doing, or maybe it's just disaster restoration, a project you didn't plan on, water damage, smoke damage, sewer backup, you name it, they've been doing it for more than 25 years, restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. You can find them online. Learn more about their team at completecarerestoration.ca. All right, let's get to this. She is fresh off a stint, an incredible opportunity to serve her country as senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada. But we've missed her here on Real Talk, and it's amazing to have an opportunity to welcome back to the show, Supriya Dwivedi. It's nice to see your face. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Love the green hoodie.
Thank you. That's why I'm wearing it, so I wouldn't be non-festive.
Is this the first Monday that you've been able to wear a hoodie in like 2 years?
I mean, to be fair, I do tend to go on the more casual side of business casual whenever I can. But I mean, yeah, this is the first Monday in like forever. I haven't been like, I didn't wake up with like a gajillion things to do on my to-do list. So this is nice, catching up with friends.
Well, hey, listen, I told you like when you accepted this role, when it was offered to you and you accepted it, we were obviously this interview is going to be a little bit different because I guess people talking to you typically don't profess their love for you and their admiration for you and talk about how close of friends we are, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit of a different vibe today for us to reconnect. But we are very proud of you and very excited for you for the opportunity, regardless of what party it is, regardless of who the Prime Minister is. An opportunity to serve your country in that capacity is incredible. How have you been wrapping your mind around, this time literally working side by side with the leader of a G7 nation?
I mean, it's been an incredible opportunity. And to your point of, somebody asks you to serve, particularly someone who inspires you and whose policy agenda you can get behind, and you jump at the opportunity. It was one of these things, and I'd spoken about this pretty publicly, but I was very wrapped up on the policy side of things when it came to like online harms and AI and other digital policy. And that is what the PM wanted to put forth as part of his agenda. And I wanted to make sure that I was going to be around for it.
So you were at times, I was just like, you at Sups Dwivedi, you've got a great Instagram if people want to follow you there, but you were posting like you were on the planes for the most part. Were you traveling with the PM, or how did that work? Were you relatively self-directed? How did it all play out?
So, I mean, I reported directly into Katie Telford, who was the chief of staff, and there were a couple of trips, international trips that I went on. But, for the most part, because I had a bit of a, like, senior advisor is a bit of an amorphous role. And I mean that in the best possible way, because you're kind of doing a smorgasbord of a bunch of stuff. So I was doing a bit of policy, a bit of issues, a bit of the comms, particularly on like the the strategic comms or planning side. And then as well, in terms of his, day to day or week to week, I guess I should say, question period. Every week when the House is sitting, he's in question period for the Prime Minister's round, and then before that for Leaders round. So I'd be part of the team that would help him prep for that towards the end. So it's a great sort of range of things that I did, and all of which I will surely look back and go, wow, that was a really fucking cool time, man.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about that because everyone that works in a capacity like that or a role like that, you may look to sort of like government policy that passed or something that every Canadian would be aware of. Obviously, you and I will talk about policy. We'll talk about Mark Carney. We'll talk about Donald Trump. We'll talk about it all this morning. But what's something that you personally, as you're looking back on your time with the PMO, that you're proud of, or something that you felt like you really made strides on?
So it's funny that you asked me that, because the joke that I've been telling a lot of folks is that I should just put a mission accomplished banner behind me. And I'm saying that with as much sarcasm as possible, because once the Parliament was prorogued, online harms died on the order paper, as did the AI regs that we were going to push through. So there isn't one piece of legislation that I could point to. But for the next progressive government that comes in that wants to make the internet safer for kids, one of the last things that Minister Virani did when he was, the point person on the online harms file was to split the bill and to make it the kids portion that would be protecting kids online into its own separate sort of standalone thing. So for the next progressive government that comes in that wants to tackle this and wants to make online spaces safer for kids, they've kind of got it ready to go and can very sort of easily implement that. Should that be something that they want to do?
It doesn't strike me as something that would have to be that's like partisan driven. You talk
it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be. Yeah,
right.
You're right.
Like you say, the next progressive government, but I can think even if let's say Pierre Poilievre wins the election, I would say that conservatives would want to protect kids online just as much. How unusual would it be for a bill that died with prorogation of Parliament to be exhumed or brought back to life by a different government? That would be highly unlikely, wouldn't it? Maybe presented differently by one of their MPs.
Sure. I think they would, each one would put their own spin on it. And your point about this shouldn't be partisan is absolutely 100,000 gajillion% right. Because, I mean, if you look at some other jurisdictions, in the UK, for example, it was a Tory government that passed their Online Safety Act. And this shouldn't be partisan. Unfortunately, however, we're seeing, and not just with this conservative movement here in Canada, but various conservative movements across the globe are moving further and further away from any sense of guardrails in online spaces to sort of spout the unencumbered online spaces that are being espoused by folks like, Elon Musk or like Mark Zuckerberg. And I think that's particularly bad for kids who, don't necessarily always have full, they don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They're being fed content that they may not necessarily understand. And in the UK, for example, the reason why folks, in terms of broader society, kind of rallied around the need for regs was because a UK coroner found that in the death of a 14-year-old girl, Instagram was causally responsible because the algorithm had been feeding that 14-year-old girl pro-suicide content once it figured out that she was depressed.
Jeez.
Molly Russell was her name. Yeah.
These are the things that we don't think about. I mean, I was talking to a buddy over the weekend, and he's just like your average type. He's a great guy, obviously, but he's not hyper politically involved. But he was talking. Even he's aware of it. He's like, I get it. He's like, my own algorithm. He's like, there's a party he knows he's going to vote for, and he's like, all I ever see is stuff that's like pro that party vote. And I'm like, yeah, man. But most people aren't, I don't think, aware of that. And I don't know if we talk about it a lot on the show, but for the average person that's just scrolling through their phone, or people that are like laying in bed swiping for an hour before they fall asleep, it's just really not on anybody's radar, let alone young people, preteens and teens that have never been given the tools of like healthy have any of us been given the tools of healthy online activity? I don't think so.
I certainly wasn't. And it's like, my kid's going to turn 6 soon. And, she's still quite young, not obviously on any social media, but it terrifies me. I feel like I'm up against the clock, sort of,
Yeah.
that I've got to figure something out so that we can at least make some of the more visited spaces for kids online a little bit safer. And it certainly shouldn't be partisan. And I hope that it won't be going forward. But I don't know. I feel like that's too naive or Pollyanna-ish to sort of conclude right now.
Yeah. Hey, just to throw it out there, if I ask you a question that's something like you can't, I don't know the terms of your employment or walking away or whatever, if there's stuff I ask you about you can't comment on, just say you can't comment on it. So,
Sure.
But you're with the PMO and you're close to Trudeau at the time, we're basically at the end of kind of a 10-year run. Basically, I guess it becomes apparent that the polling that's been dropping is not bouncing back. It wasn't correcting itself. You had a tough call to make, obviously, sort of over the holiday break. It seems he reached that conclusion and decided to wrap it up and pave the way for a liberal leadership race. What was it like to be around the prime minister at that time? When did you know that that's the direction that it was going to go?
I mean, I think senior staff kind of figured the direction it was going to go during the Christmas break. I mean, he had always sort of said after then Minister Freeland, or I guess still Minister Freeland, but in a different role, had resigned in the way that she did, it was becoming increasingly untenable, I guess we can call that. We can qualify that as, and then it was confirmed just in the days sort of leading up to it that was going to happen. There was a very early morning senior staff call the day of. Folks were sort of informed of it, and I think it was, everybody was quite sad. I don't think anybody that was around the prime minister didn't want him in some capacity to continue to lead or fight. But I think, there's the rational side of your brain and the emotional side of your brain. And, the rational side sort of kind of came to its own conclusion of everyone. So it was definitely emotional. It was definitely sad, but I don't know if there was any other sort of path. And I think in the way that Minister Freeland sort of resigned, it was sort of ensured that maximum chaos was going to ensue.
Yeah. Take us into that. Because that was like, wow. Like, just, you've hosted talk shows. So like for me, that's like silver platter kind of stuff. But I imagine when you're on the inside and it's impacting the stability of your government, silver platters aren't the first thing you're thinking of.
Yeah, look, I think one thing that's interesting that I can give a little bit of a tidbit for folks is that, I don't know if you lost my screen here.
No, we got you.
Okay. Is that she resigns officially on the Monday, right? On the Monday morning, if I get my timeline right. So it's like Monday morning. I'm on a plane. Going to Ottawa. It's chock full of MPs, liberal ministers, liberal MPs. For whatever reason, that one flight doesn't have Wi-Fi, and none of us have Wi-Fi. So when we take off, she's still very much DPM and still very much finance minister. The plan is that, we're going to go ahead and present the fall economic statement later
like
that
hours
morning.
later. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we all land, and everybody's phones start going off, and turns out that's no longer going to be the case. And, this will be talked about by folks that were very much more involved in these conversations. And I'm sure a chronology or a full detailed TikTok at some point will be out there. But she didn't give any sort of indication that resignation was going to be part of her plan until very early Monday morning. And we know from the fall economic statement, because we had them printed and ready to go on the Monday morning, that as of Friday early afternoonish, she had called the printer to pull her forward from the Fez. So she knew what she was going to do, at least ostensibly Friday afternoon, with no indication, to our folks that was going to be the case. So not only was there the blindsided nature of it, but there was also the sense of just setting us up for maximum chaos. I mean, if you folks will remember the day, you had press that were fully going to be in lockup, right? Because and they were going to report on it. There was market moving stuff in there ostensibly. And it was just, it was like a timed sort of bomb that was going off, like boom, boom, boom.
So do you think it was like, was it strategically deployed in a way to kind of inflict maximum damage?
Yeah, I think it was, and I think the folks probably around her had to, I had advised her to some degree to do that, because I can't imagine otherwise somebody doing that, particularly if you had been friends with and colleagues with somebody for as long as her and my former boss had been, because there's that human element to it too, right? I know we all like to talk about the political drama of it, and that's certainly exciting for politicos and talk show hosts like yourself, and for folks that are like to watch and listen to that sort of stuff. But there's also something to be said about knifing somebody you've known for as long as she has in the public manner that she did, and what that says about somebody's character, perhaps.
Lorraine's watching us on our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. She says Freeland's 8% leadership result reflects the manner in which she resigned. Do you think so? Do you think that Liberal Party members kind of punished her for the way that she went about it? I saw some people celebrating what she did. They said she got the ball rolling. She may have saved the party's chances in the next election.
Yeah, like I can't get into the headspace of what folks were thinking when they were casting their ballot, but I'd have to imagine to some degree, because politics is very much like a capital T team sport, and loyalty is everything, that there were at least a sizable chunk of registered Liberal voters who didn't necessarily care for the way she went about it. Because I mean, she could have very well resigned, but giving the PM more than like a 45 minutes ish heads up the day of, or by letting, our team know through her team or whatever it was. And that certainly wasn't the case.
This is an interesting question. Then I'll move on from Chrystia, because we have like a million things we want to talk about. But Jillian's got an interesting point. Jillian, just like you, by the way, hailing from Montreal originally, she says, I find that political advisors aren't great at advising women. She says too often women in politics pull moves that may fly if you were a dude, but they would never fly if you're a woman. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. So I guess Jillian's point is that had Freeland been a man, perhaps she would have been heralded a little bit more. And that's possible. And I think that's likely true to some degree. It is, however, impossible to prove a counterfactual like that, right?
Yeah. So it's been interesting to watch. So the prime minister, he resigns as Liberal leader. He's still the prime minister, though, of course, until Mark Carney takes over. And so Justin Trudeau is, making statements, standing up for Canada, for Canada's sovereignty. I thought, quite frankly, on a messaging front, Trudeau did some of his best work over the past couple of months in face of great adversity from Trump and Elon Musk and the others, this MAGA machine. What was it like to watch that? Because on one hand, you've got Trump sort of saying, I don't care what he has to say, right? Like he's leaving. His political opponents in Canada saying the same thing. He's resigned. This is kind of a lame duck prime minister. But at the same time, to call it turmoil would be putting it lightly. These two major economies, including the biggest economy in the world, in flux. Canada fighting with the U.S. What the hell's going on? Everybody's wondering. What was that like to be a part of?
I mean, it was interesting just because of every day was different in terms of what chaos we were all sort of going to wake up to. And I would just say that in terms of, the PM doing particularly well in the last couple of months, can I just say that this was we had already sort of envisioned that was always going to be the case. And that's why it was so frustrating to hear so much of the gallery, like the press gallery and so many pundits say completely unironically that somehow this was going to be a carbon tax election. It was never going to be a fucking carbon tax election the second Trump was elected. And we all knew that the minute he was going to be inaugurated, Canada was going to be faced with serious economic threats, much like we did in Trump 1.0. And we know that from Trump 2.0, at least in how Project 2025 was laid out and how some of his folks were speaking with quite a bit of candor and frankness, that we were going to be in for this sort of, tumultuous time, at least economically. And it's interesting that, I've had so many people be like, oh, he was so great. He was so great as like Captain Canada. He's so great when he's sticking up for Canada. And it's like, really? You think so? Yeah, we knew that.
So you're saying you just thought that he was consistent with what he had represented or what he had stood for the entire time?
I think he was consistent with what he represented. And I think a guy like Justin Trudeau is exceptional when he's up against the ropes, and he is exceptional in a time of crisis. So whether that's through COVID or whether that's through Trump 1.0, now Trump 2.0 at the beginning, he, in my view, I was always going to be great. And that's why I don't think any of us that were around him were particularly surprised in, how he conducted himself. And again, let's not forget that a lot of the stuff that Trump was initially sort of musing about has at least been paused or pulled back, or to be honest, now that I'm not into the day-to-day, I'm not fully abreast of what the latest threat may have been through Truth Social or reposted through Twitter or whatever. But it's been, like I think to some degree, it's like this is always who he sort of was. And I think people may have just forgotten. You can get, and that's fine, like that's politics. But the fact that we let the narrative become that it was going to be a carbon tax election through a Trump presidency is just lunacy to me. And we should be demanding better and smarter thinking from the folks that are setting that political narrative.
Probably could have been a carbon tax election had Kamala won. Would you agree?
Yeah, maybe. But let's not forget, like, the Democrats are kind of protectionist too, right? And it's like, I don't think it would have been as smooth. Like, I think it probably would have been smoother sailing, but I don't know if it would have been completely calm waters, because in terms of the senators that would have voted against Usmaka, whatever they call it, like, NAFTA 2.0, like, she was one of the senators that didn't vote for it. And she mentioned that on one of the debate stages. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
like, it certainly wouldn't have been this.
Yeah,
but,
maybe there would have been sort of like, heels dug in, back to the drawing board, renegotiating some deals, some pain felt for certain industries, but there wouldn't be bullshit around, governor this and annexation that, and this, totally. this what do they call it? The artificially drawn line. And Johnny and I were talking about this late last week. He's talking about, you're probably going to see more American soldiers in Greenland, and nobody thinks that's a joke anymore.
The video.
You got the video. Why don't we roll this? You've seen this, Supriya, but for the audience that may have missed it, this is the President of the United States. This is the Commander-in-Chief of the world's most powerful military. Here's Donald Trump.
And Denmark is not able to do that. Denmark's very far away and really has nothing to do. What happens? A boat landed there 200 years ago or something, and they say they have rights to it. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it is, actually. But we've been dealing with Denmark, we've been dealing with Greenland, and we have to do it. We really need it for national security. I think that's why NATO might have to get involved in a way, because we really need Greenland for national security. It's very important. We have a couple of bases on Greenland already, and we have quite a few soldiers, and maybe you'll see more and more soldiers go there. I don't know. What do you think about that, Pete? So... Don't answer that, Pete. Don't answer that.
But then everybody's like, ha, 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 ha. But it's like, no. It's not funny. And I think when you say, oh, what, like a boat landed there 200 years ago and now they say it's theirs? Well, I mean, if this is how we're approaching like every single sovereignty claim on planet Earth, then people better be ready for a pretty big shakeup.
And again, I think we can point to his own words. I mean, in his inaugural speech or address, whatever it's called, he did say, or he alluded to, there's a line in there about how the U.S. hasn't expanded its territory in however many years. So territorial expansion has at least been on his mind since the inauguration speech. And I'd imagine in conversations before that with his advisors. And so I think that there is some degree of, do we take him seriously or literally or whatever the quote was from Trump 1.0. But I think we have to take everything he's saying extremely seriously. And I think we have to really consider the fact that the world in which we knew it in terms of the rules-based international order is gone or going, and we need to figure out a new way to go about it, and that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what does that look like, I guess? By the way, I want to reference Les tossing $20 into our YouTube super chat. Very generous, Les. You don't have to do that, buddy. He says, I think Trudeau deserves more credit than he's getting. He got us through COVID. He got us a pipeline to the coast. He brought child poverty down by 50% and more. And Poilievre can't even thank him for his service to the country. How did the... Actually, let me just ask you to respond to that. You smirked. For the podcast listeners, you smirked.
Well, I mean, Poilievre is who he is, and he's also been very clear about who he is and kind of a jerk. I don't know. Like, he doesn't seem like too much of a nice guy. All of these like political norms that we would have thought of in terms of, congratulating a leader for their service. Like, look, like Aaron O'Toole responded to PM Trudeau in his last tweet, like, thank you for your service, like, have fun with your family, or like, enjoy your time with your family, something to that degree. And like, that's just gone because, and I think, it's top down. You get decorum and you get norms from the leader. And right now, the leader of the Conservatives is very much of the terminally online campus conservative, like, I drink liberal tears kind of vibe. And, that's fine, but it's going to catch up to him at some point, and I think it kind of already is. Yeah,
so let's talk about that. Ultimately, what is the risk? Like, I would say I'm a civilian. I've never managed a campaign. This is just me speculating, but I would imagine one of the risks of having a very young, sort of a dynamic voter base. This is like the Jordan Peterson disciples. These are the Joe Rogan listeners. These are the, everybody calls them the Bitcoin bros, that kind of idea. This is like, if you kind of look generally speaking at a significant part of this membership that Pierre Poilievre has attracted, it's young and they're enthusiastic. But then you also talk about like the GOTV, when you got to like actually get out the vote, when you got to actually convince young people on election day, you got to go to the polling station, you got to vote. Young people are less inclined to do so. That might be one of the challenges. But what are some of the other ways that you think that this could bite Poilievre when the rubber hits the road in the next couple of months?
So I think him being unable to pivot is likely what's going to bite him in the butt the greatest, if we're, ranking butt bitings, just because I think he's still very much trying to, run a carbon tax ballot question election. And I think that time has passed. That's no longer the case. It is going to be about Trump. It's going to be about who's going to be standing up for Canadian interests and Canadian sovereignty in a way that we've certainly never really had to, at least in my lifetime, and I would expect in at least a few lifetimes, right? But one thing I will say that's also will be challenging, or at least that the new Liberal government should be careful not to do, is don't forget who your base is. And if you're trying to present yourself as conservative light or as like a progressive conservative government from like the 90s, they may have a problem in getting butts off the couch for GoTV. Because if I'm a middle of the road, actual centrist voter who likes conservative policies, why wouldn't I just vote for the real thing? And I think Liberals need to remind themselves that in terms of who the largest voting demographic is, it is millennials right now, combined with Gen Zs. And what are we concerned about for the most part? It's housing prices. So you'll see polling, for example, shoot up like, American Canadian relations or economic uncertainty right to the top. But if you're a part of the younger demographic, you still care about things like rent and housing and, how far a certain paycheck goes when it comes to the cost of groceries or other things that are, that your day-to-day expenses. And I think they'd be completely remiss to sort of try and brand themselves as like, this is your father's Liberal Party, or basically a progressive conservative government. I think that could really come to bite them in the butt.
Mark Carney axes the tax. so to speak, canceling the consumer carbon tax. Pierre Poilievre has sort of adjusted his moniker from carbon tax Carney to, I think it's now carbon tax con job Carney, or Carney's carbon tax con job. Says it's not actually axing the tax. He's describing it kind of as smoke and mirrors before the next election. You understand brass tacks and how this actually works. Take us into what Carney did and how that's going to impact Canadians. What are your thoughts on how he's handling this file? A lot of people maybe a little bit surprised. Carney supported the carbon tax for a long time. Now he's dumping it.
Yeah, I mean, so did all of those cabinet ministers around that table, as did the vast majority of MPs, right? So
and progressive Canadian premiers.
Yeah, 100%. So like it is a walk back. I think he was at least somewhat clear in terms of that's the direction he was going to do. So what he did, I guess you're asking what he did last week or last Friday, whenever it was, that he signs a PM decision note. That is what he brought, I guess, reporters in to see. So he signs a decision note that then goes to PCO, to the Privy Council. They then would go to the affected departments of the PM decision note. Affected departments would then come forward with like an OIC, then that goes to the Governor General to sign. So effectively what Carney has done is that the April 1st sort of escalation that the carbon tax was going to see has now been brought down to zero. So the actual charge of the carbon tax is $0, which is what he did. And then, because I guess the Conservatives are kind of being nitpicky in terms of like the legislation itself has not yet to be repealed, which is fine and fair, I guess. But let's not pretend that they don't know what a PM decision note is. Like these PMs of all ilks, of all stripes, sign these regularly. It's a very normal thing. And that's how the process works. And it's a shame to see so much, willful misunderstanding, if we want to be charitable about that, that's being spread around the interwebs about it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Poilievre, it's kind of like a shit kind of a moment, because that's kind of been his main thing. And so now he's honing in on Carney's, sort of his like elite background, his 1%, his time as a banker. I don't know. I mean, I guess we've litigated on this show many times. I think you're in a tough spot when you're trying to criticize and make fun of somebody for being like an Oxford and a Harvard grad, for being extremely successful in your career, for being smarter than most people in the room. I get that.
Look at this jerk, super smart and successful.
This idiot went to Harvard and Oxford, and he's worked for the world's biggest companies, and he was governor of the two major banks. Like, okay, but. You could present it as though, Mark Carney doesn't understand the plight of the average person. Like, hey, Mark, how much does a loaf of bread cost? But then you run the risk, if you're Pierre Poilievre, of him pointing out that, you earned a full pension at like age 31 and like you haven't cooked your own dinner in 10 years and you've got a driver everywhere you go and everything else. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like it's going to get into this weird pissing match. Ultimately, I'd be curious for your take on where you think Poilievre can most effectively hammer Carney and how you think Carney can most effectively clap back.
So I think the pissing match, like nobody is going to win in terms of that. But I think if he were to needle Carney in terms of, just how successful he is, where his assets, how they're placed, how they're being managed, if there are any, conflicts that Canadians should be aware of. And I know Carney and his team have stated that they've, have everything cleared by the ethics commissioner. But I don't think that's going to stop Poilievre or any of his front bench MPs or any of the right-wing kind of media machine to not point that out. I do think that's fair game. I think and it's somewhat unfortunate that the Liberal leadership race was so truncated and so friendly, because Carney didn't really receive any real jabs. He hasn't been tested. So if he's walking into a debate with Poilievre, which, would arguably happen at some point, or if he's going to become, and he already is, but if he's going to be on the receiving end of a rage machine or a disinfo machine, then they've got to be ready for it. And the other thing I would point out is that a guy like Carney, whether you're from business or you're from the tech world, the press that you kind of engage with is a lot more compliant. I don't know how I would put it. Like they're a lot more amicable, I guess. There's not that necessarily that adversarial sort of role that you see with a political press. And so he'd be well advised to not come across as snippy, because the last thing you want is for a Carney to not only be positioned by the opposition as somebody who's like an elitist, out of touch, flying on PJs everywhere before he got this gig, but he also is, comes across as snipey or snippy when he's interacting with local journalists or with the press gallery.
When do you expect the election to be called? Some people think it's going to be today. Some people think it'll be the 23rd of March, right before the prorogation ends. What do you think?
I don't think it would be today. He's not in the country today, is he?
No, he's in Europe right now.
Yeah. So I think
when it's going to be, don't you?
No, I don't know when it's going to be. I don't actually know when it's going to be. I think it'll be soon. I would imagine it's going to be within the next couple of weeks. Dude doesn't have a seat, so like I can't imagine he wants the House to resume without a seat, right?
Does it benefit him? Like, I guess the wager here is like, does it benefit you to have just like won with 86% and everybody's talking about you and like kind of strike while the iron's hot? Or, Andrew Coyne argued the case a couple of weeks ago, says, Carney may want to govern for a while. Like maybe he wants to kind of give people a sense of what he's all about, let Canadians get to know him a little bit better. What do you think?
I mean, maybe, but like the very first chance that I think the opposition parties will have to bring the House down, they're going to do it.
Yep.
And I can't imagine, like, and again, I'm not privy to any of these conversations, but like, I can't imagine that the NDP or the Bloc are willing to support a Liberal government right now. I know that Jagmeet has been going back and forth, throughout, saying maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But quite frankly, his word isn't worth very much right now, given the fact that he ripped up that SACA deal without giving the Liberals any sort of head notice or anything like that. So I'd imagine that everyone in Liberal HQ is prepping for an election to be called imminently.
What do you make of Carney's early moves? The cabinet, who he's putting around him, policy advisors, foreign policy advisors. What do you make of his first few days?
So I think it's interesting who's not in cabinet. I think it's a huge mistake, not to put Karina Gould into that cabinet. I think not only does she represent the more progressive wing of the party, but she's a young suburban mom. Like, it just seems like that would be our bread and butter. I think it's quite indicative as well of keeping Mark Miller out of cabinet. I think that's an interesting, surprising sort of move. His foreign policy advisor is a conservative who, if you're of a certain age, let's say between 30 and 40 in a certain Toronto media circle, you probably best know him as the guy who harassed a 26-year-old journalist, a female journalist, off of Twitter because she tweeted out, "I'm looking for pitches for BuzzFeed Canada from folks that aren't male and aren't white." And he decided he was going to throw a shit fit and called for her to be fired and harassed her off of Twitter, and which led to many a pile-on and many a death and rape threat for her. Sachi Cool is her name, by the way, and that's her book right behind me. Sucker
Nice.
Punch. It's her second book. Her first one was a New York Times bestseller.
Didn't that just come out, by the way?
It did. It's excellent.
Nice plug.
So I just think it's an interesting thing to signal that you're hiring a conservative to advise you on foreign policy. I think it's an interesting signal to keep somebody like Karina Gould out of cabinet. And again, that's fine. Like it's different governments have different vibes, different leaders want to bring forward different attributes and different things. But I think, it can be butt biting if we want to shorten the term, if you're going to forget about the folks that have been there election in and election out, that have stayed with the Liberals going forward. And maybe they have the ability to cobble together an entirely new voter coalition, and I will be happily surprised if that's the case. But we just don't have a ton of time, and it seems like they're more concerned with appeasing conservative voters than they are with showing progressive liberal voters why they're the party that should be, voted back into power.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to frame it. Like, I guess maybe the play there is that, you figure that, the polls have shown that the party's bounced back in fulsome fashion.
Yeah.
The NDP is like wallowing. I think sort of like mired down. I mean, Jagmeet Singh's got his own problems. And maybe that's just where they feel like they can kind of steal that 5%, that 5-6%. Maybe they can find it from people that had parked their vote with Poilievre for now as sort of like an anti-Trudeau statement, or kind of looking for change that may deem Mark Carney as change enough if Poilievre doesn't completely represent the values that they hold economically, socially, or otherwise.
Change enough. Put that on a bumper sticker.
Change enough. Let's not change too much. We're Canadians. Let's not blow this whole thing up. I'll let Real Talkers know if you want to learn a little bit more about what makes Karina Gould tick. You can check out our February 19th interview with her. Supriya, she joined us in studio. She's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the word, like just, impressive. Entertaining sounds a little bit dismissive. I don't mean to use the word entertaining, but she's captivating. Like she's like the youngest female federal cabinet minister in Canadian history, which definitely is a thing. I think, you don't go into any leadership race knowing you're going to lose. I don't think that's how I want to sort of portray it. But like, she knew that she was the underdog. She came in. That's my first question to her. But she didn't act like it in the interview. For anybody that wants to get to know her a little bit more, check that out. That's our February 19th episode.
And like, the other thing I will just say is that she's so incredibly smart. Like, she speaks 5 languages, is the most down-to-earth person there is. Like the kind of person that in like university you would have wanted to sit beside in every class because she was so smart, but then also go for a beer with her afterwards just to be like, why are you so smart? Tell me about it. Like it's, I don't know. So I just think it was a real mistake not to put her in there.
We value your time, and we're already over time with you. So let me just ask you this in closing. Obviously, hopefully you and I will be able to catch up on a more regular basis moving forward. But this is day 1 of your time outside the PMO. So you've earned some downtime too, for sure. Doug Ford calls an early election. Costs Ontarians like $130 million to do it, but he earns himself a little extra time as premier, and obviously has taken a pretty upfront role, one of the more prominent political roles in Canada through this early tariff war. Probably him and Danielle Smith, I would say, though striking a different tone, the two of them. What do you make of the early election and the win by Doug Ford, 3 straight majorities? And for that matter, what do you make of what Danielle Smith's been doing and kind of the future of trade negotiation, including provincial leaders speaking out and doing some direct diplomacy stateside?
So I think the premiers need to be careful in terms of doing the direct diplomacy. And I'm not saying that as like a paternalistic, like only the federal government can be doing it. Like if you're doing it with respect to like there's a coordinated sort of strategy and it's like, okay, I'm going to go on and talk about energy. I'm going to do this interview to talk about dairy or something, or talk about eggs or whatever the case may be, or auto manufacturing, then that's fine. But I think we get into trouble if you've got a bunch of freelancing premiers that are going in and speaking about things of which they don't necessarily have the authority or the policy levers to be able to act upon, and you can find yourself in a little bit of hot water, I guess. I think one thing that Premier Ford has done excellently is going to where he knows the folks are. So, making regular appearances on Fox News. I think he makes a great case for Canada and for, obviously on Ontario. Premier Smith, I think, is a little bit more confounding to me. I completely understand why she's doing the things that she's doing for what she believes to be the best path forward. But it seems at times, at least from somebody living in Ontario, that it often, or at least sometimes, it can undercut what perhaps the Ontario premier has said, or what the Quebec premier has said, or what, you know what I mean? And it's like, y'all need to be on one team. Maybe just have a group chat that's just the premiers. They can, practice their talking points going forward, so each one knows what the other one's saying.
I would love to be able to monitor a group chat with all the premiers, Alberta included. I want to see what Alberta's is. Alberta would be the group chat personality that's either like leaving the long rants at 3 a.m. We all have or that's just like hasn't replied
thumbs
to,
up.
or
just do thumbs up to everything.
Thumbs up. Yep. Yes. One words. Couple of questions from live chat, Real Talkers, before we let you go. Scarlett wonders, Supriya, what's the signal on removing the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality and also Mental Health and Addictions? Is it just for the election? What do you think?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer to that, but that's another signal, I think, particularly moving wage, which is, women and gender equality. I'd like to think that, because it's still folded into heritage, I think for the most part, you've got at least some aspects there. But I think, again, this is one of those things where it's what was signaled. And I think that the signal was, we got to cut cabinet. We got to look like we're tightening our belts. And again, that certainly works for a certain demographic and a certain crowd. But if I'm 32 and I can't afford anything and I'm feeling as though, everything is not only an uphill battle, but a steep uphill battle, I don't know if that's the kind of thing I care about.
Yeah, fair enough. Will you permit the question? Does it have anything to do with the Liberals coming across as a little less woke?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, I'm sure that's part of it.
Yeah.
But do Liberal voters think Liberals are woke, or is that something Conservative voters have convinced themselves because they're on a steady rage diet fed by the Rebel and True North and Canada Proud and what have you, and are being fed ridiculous things being said by Pierre Poilievre, where he compared Prime Minister Trudeau to a Marxist dictator, even called him a Marxist dictator. Like these are not normal things to be said, nor are they factually based. So if you're saying that Liberals got played, then yeah, sure, I guess we got played.
Final question from Sharon. Carney wouldn't answer it himself on Friday, but she wants to know where you think he's going to run. Here in the West, it'd be pretty remarkable to see Carney run in Edmonton Center. I know it's it's flip-flop back and forth. Some pretty prominent. Anne McClellan has been an MP there. Laurie Hahn has been a Conservative MP there. Randy Boissonnault, a Liberal MP there and minister. James Cumming, a Conservative MP there. Cumming losing the nomination for the Conservatives. They've got this young up-and-comer. I think it's Saeed Ahmed off the top of my head. Boissonnault says he wants to run in that riding again, which I just can't wrap my mind around. And then you've got Tricia Estabrooks, a former CBC journalist and former chair of the Edmonton Public School Board, running for the NDs. So it's a very interesting riding to watch. A lot of people think Mark Carney might run in Edmonton Center. What do you think? And do you have the inside track? Sharon wants to know.
I don't have the inside track, but to your point about Edmonton Center being crowded enough already, is interesting. I'd also just point out, though, I know Randy did say he wanted to run, but there's a new leader, and he did endorse Freeland, did he not? I don't think he endorsed Carney.
He did endorse Chrystia Freeland.
So I don't know.
But I would say, respectfully to Randy, I said this to his face, but if no leader could allow Randy Boissonnault to run in a riding that they could possibly win. Do you agree? I know that Randy believes he can win, but it's a circus. It's been a complete circus, and you just can't allow a circus under your watch as a new leader. You look like it looks like an endorsement. Looks like you're okay with everything.
Well, especially when he didn't even endorse you. So what's the point of endorsing circus if he wouldn't even have your back, right? There's got to be some sort of that quid pro quo there, but. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see.
It's great to see your face again. Thanks for doing this. Literally day one of whatever your new era is going to look like, and you made time for us, and we sure appreciate it. We've missed you a lot. The live chat exploded when you showed up, and we look forward to talking to you again soon, Supriya. Thanks for this.
My pleasure, Ryan. Talk soon.
Yeah, you bet. That's Supriya Dwivedi. One of our favorites, obviously, a longtime media commentator, political pundit, strategist, and, of course, most recently, senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada. How cool is that? I want to get to some of your comments here on the live chat. We'll spend some time. Jill says, I guess, where was the comment? What did she say here? Something like, I guess, feeding poor kids is woke, I guess. Fair enough. That was part of it, though. Do you remember, Johnny, like through this leadership race, and regardless of who you were talking about, whether it was Bayless, Gould, Freeland, or Carney, it would come up. Like, have the Liberals did the pendulum swing a little too far left under Trudeau? And how do, like, longtime Liberal Party members feel about that? And how do members of the general public feel about that? And is that kind of where the party needs to swing back a little bit more towards the middle? That was kind of a talking point. Interesting to hear from Supriya. She's obviously not swayed by that or not sold by that. But no. I thought Scarlett asked a good question there on the cabinet allocation. Cabinet could look different after an election, obviously.
Sure. Supriya is so woke. Yeah, a lot of things, just the first question, a lot of things became woke in the last 10 years that I thought were just like, having empathy and stuff. Like people are talking so much now about, the foreign aid we give to people. You see Trump just slashing all the foreign aid, and we had our ag group talking about how that was affecting them, and it's affecting everything.
Yeah.
And, people are saying, foreign aid is woke. And I always... And you're talking to a guy, an average guy who's not the smartest guy in the room, but I always perceived foreign aid as like kind of maintaining global stability, right? You can't have, it's like if the rich people only got their lawns mowed, the rest of your city becomes a jungle. And that's a metaphor. Like, we don't want this stuff on our doorstep. When people become starving and desperate, they do things, desperate measures, right? And those things become like crime and war and disease and famine. And so the reason we use our money to help with foreign aid isn't because we're just woke and we want to give people free money. It's to prevent these things from coming to Canada, from coming to our doorstep. And yes, it's about empathy, and yes, it's about global stability, but it's also about keeping everything in check so that these things don't come to our doorstep, right? And it really caught me off guard as someone who tries to understand geopolitics, but at the same time isn't an expert. But I was like, how is this woke? This is preventing, world economies and politics from collapsing, right? So I always thought that was kind of strange that like helping people out is like woke now. It's strange. It's very weird to me.
I asked you to stop doing something a while ago.
And I keep doing it.
And that was to stop qualifying everything you say with "I'm not the smartest person in the room."
I just mean I'm the everyman in the room.
But I think
I'm
that
the guy
point you
who's
made
not,
is a very good point,
right? I'm not the guy who can quote stats off the top of his head about the economy and things like that. But I get that feeling that like all of a sudden now helping people out and maintaining global stability is kind of woke. But this stuff, when Trump stops giving aid to places that need them and people who just need food to not starve, it really scares me that the world stability is going to go off the mark. And that stuff, if you think immigration's affecting us, wait until people get really desperate and start starving and can't do anything to, help their families survive. That's when people really start breaking the mold. And that's when this, like, you want crime to be lower. You want your family to be safe. You've got to prevent people from becoming desperate.
Super Chat Ken says, I don't really care about the woke characterization, but the Liberals did badly drop the ball on matching housing to non-permanent immigration. I don't know if Supriya will hear all this, but I do want to put all this on the record. Just a little bit of a love in here. It's just love letting guests know how much they're appreciated. Wobbly Inc. is in the chat, says it's great to see and hear from Supriya today. What a great way to start the week. Eileen says, I love that lady. Cactus Sheriff says, yay, Supriya, don't stay away so long again. I understand Tracy. Tracy says, I wanted more juicy gossip. Fair enough. We don't want to get I don't know what how that is always when someone leaves the employ of somewhere, unless they're sort of starting the house on fire on their way out, which is not what she's doing. And Michael says, I'm so glad she's back. I really missed her. Tony wondering if we're going to fire up our podcast again together. Who knows? Supriya and I, we're not there yet. We haven't chatted yet. She has been gainfully employed by the freaking Prime Minister of Canada for the last while. But it's awesome just to get her back on the show.
Talk
and to hear
all you
her
want.
voice
That's
again.
one of the coolest jobs ever,
Yeah.
no matter who it's for. Yeah.
We've got more from Trump on Canada. We have polling. We ran an unofficial, unscientific Twitter poll on EV ownership.
I love it.
And so we want to get to the results of that. We want to deliver the results of that. But first, Real Talkers, I want to make sure that this is on your radar with the Full House Lottery. The bonus prize for the Full House Lottery is an incredible choice. You can check it out right now. You can either set sail on a dream yacht tour with a private chef. Johnny, a dream yacht tour with a private chef. With a $125,000 Travel Gurus gift certificate.
I'll be musking it.
Can you imagine that? Or if it's not your dream prize, you can just take $100,000 cash instead. You win, you choose. And if you buy your tickets by midnight on March 19th, that's Wednesday of this week, not only are you going to be entered in the bonus draw, but get ready for an action-packed early bird as you can win a car a day. A car a day! Or take the cash alternative. The Full House Lottery has it all, including 3 grand prizes. Grand prize number 1, a home. This is amazing. This grand prize worth over $2.25 million, including a stunning legacy signature dream home, a 2025 Alfa Romeo, and $20,000 cash. I absolutely love how they structure this. Grand prize 2 is dream vacations for life. Let's check this out. $210,000 cash to spend on travel or whatever you choose. Grand prize number 3 is one of those dream tiny homes. You and I were loving these. Checking these out on Instagram the other days. You can choose either a $250,000 Fritz tiny home gift certificate or take $200,000 cash. The choices are yours. It's time to dream big and win bigger with Full House Lottery. Get your tickets before that bonus deadline, midnight, March 19th. You can get your tickets online today at fullhouse.ca. Our friends at California Closets reminding you that they are proudly Canadian-owned and operated. As a matter of fact, right here in Alberta. And that means that your beautiful custom closets, your storage solutions are going to be designed, manufactured, and installed by Albertans right here in Alberta, guaranteed for life. It all starts with a free consultation. Whether you're looking at maybe putting a Murphy bed into that spare bedroom that's doubling as a home office, maybe you've always dreamed of a home library, beautiful bookshelves. It could be getting your boot room organized, the entryway, the mud room that could use a little extra love. Whatever it is, your California Closets install will be custom designed, and it'll work with your budget. Their team experts in all of that. You can learn more about their approach and request that free consultation today. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. Our family has been going on 8 years from our work together. Their website, californiaclosets.ca. And all this talk about investments and markets and instability. Our friends at North Road Investment Council reminding you they are a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. For high net worth individuals in particular, financial management is not about guesswork, it's about strategy. And that's where North Road Investment Council comes in. Their team creates customized investment plans to help you achieve your unique goals with confidence. North Road Investment Council is a steady hand guiding you through wealth and investing, and they've got 4 pillars that make them different. That's investment counsel, financial planning, insurance, and digital risk advisory. They're the only ones doing it. You can take their digital risk quiz today to find out where you may be vulnerable and where they can help you out. All of it online at northroadic.com. Pretty wild to see Donald Trump quadrupling down on his narrative around Canada. But we wanted to bring just a couple of clips. And I know for a lot of people, if you're not paying attention to the news cycle every 10 minutes, things change and you may not realize it. But sort of, I guess you might call them updated or fresh comments on Canada that caused both of us who were texting each other over the weekend going, did you see this? Did you see this? We'll talk it out. But first, let's get to it. Here's the President of the United States talking about his neighbor to the north. That's us.
No, I'm not. Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all. Aluminum or steel or cars. We're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. I have many friends in Canada. The great one, Wayne Gretzky, the great. Hey, how good is Wayne Gretzky? He's the great one. But we have, I know many people from Canada that are good friends of mine. But, you know, the United States can't subsidize a country for $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need anything that they give. We do it because we want to be helpful, but it comes a point when you just can't do that. You have to run your own country. And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. Just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states. Maybe our greatest state. But why should we subsidize another country for $200 billion? It costs us $200 billion a year. And again, we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry. We have to do this. Yes.
The guys really got away with words. I love this from Jim watching us on YouTube. Jim just says, not great. They need us. We don't need them. We don't need you. We don't need you. We don't need anything you have. We don't need anything you sell us. We don't need anything you produce. But please come join us. You might be our greatest state.
Yeah, and you know, maybe I was wrong before. I mean, not about the Canada thing. I still don't think Canada. There's not a snowball's chance in hell, to quote our former PM, of that ever happening. But the Greenland stuff we played earlier, like for the first time, invoking that there's soldiers there. Maybe there should be more there. Like invoking that maybe we should use military force to take Greenland because, yeah, it's a smaller, like the population there is smaller and it might be easier. That's scary talk to hear. Like it's not funny anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, Aaron says this is an abusive relationship. Aurora Astra says that border line is artificial, just like his tan. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It is pretty wild hearing somebody describe a border as just an artificial, unnecessary, arbitrarily drawn line when he was obsessing over the border as justification for his tariff war, right?
Such a juxtaposition.
Obsessing over it at one moment and then describing it as absolutely meaningless.
I agree. Well, he's half right. Like borders are, you know, fake lines or whatever, but like this is the largest unprotected border in the world for a reason, because we've been friends for so long. So this just, I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks, but, and it has cooled down. Like you're seeing at the sports games now, like they're not booing the American national anthem anymore. Things have cooled down a bit, but I still think in the back of their mind, Canadians think if he goes into Greenland and takes it, maybe we are next.
Well, and Justin in our chat says this is all exactly the same type of rhetoric that Putin used before he invaded Ukraine and many other nations. This is a threat, plain and simple. And I guess maybe what I'm saying, it's funny. Sometimes I stop myself on the show from saying something because I go, well, that's just so obvious. But maybe sometimes we need to just say the obvious thing is that me, and maybe you're like me, I sit there and I go, yeah, but this is different. Like Canada and the U.S., it's different. Like the U.S. would never send troops into Canada. The U.S. would never send fighter planes over into Canadian airspace to like send a message. The U.S. would never park an aircraft carrier just off Vancouver Island to sort of get everybody thinking. The U.S. would never. And then I guess in a situation like this with an unpredictable president, a president who, we always say this, you know, when we don't know what else to say, we say a president, you know, when they made Donald Trump, they broke the mold. Not exactly your average president, not exactly sort of standard operating procedures. Maybe we've taken this for granted. I can't imagine a scenario where the U.S. would take military action against Canada. And if the U.S. did do that, then you'd have a situation where, I mean, do you think it's a mistake? Do you think it's fluke that Mark Carney is over in Europe right now? Do you think it's a fluke that he's over there talking to political leadership in France and
You got
the
to
UK
strengthen
and
those connections. Yeah.
right? But you think that, and again, like it feels almost silly to talk like this, but maybe it's not, and maybe we do need to have talks like this. But you think that Britain, you think that Europe, you think that NATO members, you think the rest of the world would watch and allow that to happen?
No, not at all. And I don't know whether he's just brilliant and I'm missing it, or it's just some whimsical stuff that pours out. But you notice how Trump, and maybe he's just a master at this, he sprinkles in almost like a bit of comedy. He'll say something so outrageous and so that just it's so jarring to another country, to Canadians, to people from Greenland. And then he'll say, the great Wayne Gretzky, the great, and oh, Canada, I love, like he just sprinkles in stuff to kind of soften the blow. But that, I don't know, maybe that's just makes it even scarier. But yeah, I know I've been saying on the show for weeks, and so have you, like this is never going to happen. But when he used the term, when he invoked soldiers and military force with Greenland, and now you've got Greenland like protests and they're out there with signs now saying no way, and it's in another language, but I assume they're saying F Trump and all these other things. But when you've got the people coming out now like that and being absolutely terrified that they're going to send more troops into a sovereign nation and try and take it over, now I'm rethinking it. Maybe I don't know how far Trump will go to do this with Canada.
Ytrium's right. Says Jespo, I don't know. Says the U.S. moved a warship off the coast of Mexico this weekend to send a message. It can happen here. Washington Post reporting that the Pentagon did deploy a Navy destroyer for what it describes as an unusual U.S. border mission. Reports that the warship may be sent to patrol in the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico. They clarify, which President Donald Trump has renamed the Gulf of America. So there you go. A good point from Ytrium. Justin follows up by saying the head of NATO sat by and said absolutely nothing while Trump talked about annexing Canada and Greenland. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're not going to have him chiming in over talk, maybe more over action, but I'll take your point. Chelsea the Ginge says one difference is that Americans are not in the same place that Russian nationals are in with Putin. I don't think Americans would just stand by and let this all happen.
I don't think so either. Well, I hope they would.
What are you talking about then? Then you're talking about derelict of duty U.S. servicemen and women that are refusing orders to. I mean, geez, are we even seriously talking about this?
I mean, we're pretending that like we're totally different people. Like there's Americans with Canadian relatives, and there's Americans who come over here and vacation the same way we do down there. There's Americans that do business with Canadians every single day. Our economies are eternally linked. So yeah, I don't believe servicemen and women would sign up or you know what I mean, go over across our border to take us over. I don't see that happening either. So, and wouldn't that be great to see? Refusing service, when asked to come over here. But I mean, would it really be conflict? I mean, if they send military over here, like it's mind-boggling to me that we would start actually fighting Americans, for our sovereignty.
Well, I mean, yeah, like number one, we'd get our ass kicked, but number two,
of course,
like number two, it's just what a bizarre thing to even talk about. What a bizarre
Grenada.
thing to
it would be a bloodbath.
Yeah. So, and obviously no disrespect to our brave men and women that protect our country.
Not at all.
Obviously, but it's just like
the
this
numbers.
is the most powerful military in the world. But this is not the type of, I mean, I don't know. I don't even quite frankly know how to wrap my mind around this type of talk. Michael says, I think that he's just sort of like continuing on. He's just treating this like it's The Apprentice, but in real life. He's all about ratings, and he wants everybody to love him.
Well, it's also great distraction from everything else that they may be doing behind the scenes, the stock market ticking down. It's a great distraction to keep that entertainment value going, even if he knows there's no end to it. It's just great to keep people's minds off other things.
Lorraine says it's not funny. It never was. It's getting serious. Americans are standing by and letting him do all kinds of shit, which is true. Did you see, by the way, Trump claiming the win, his golf club championship over the weekend? Claims
He's played a lot of golf.
Yeah. Apparently, I don't know if this is actually true. I haven't seen the receipts. They say that it costs $10 million for him to fly down and play golf every single weekend at his Florida club.
We're talking about like Secret Service costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything,
to fly the plane down, fly his protection down. $10 million if that's true. $10 million every single weekend for the president to go play golf at his club. But yeah, congratulations to Donald Trump on winning another club championship at his own club. It's got Kim Jong-un vibes to it, doesn't it? How many holes in one?
It's it's like when Putin plays hockey in Russia. Like, I can't wait for Trump to
8
go
goals
into the PGA and just win a green jacket. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, people say, well, he's winning in the advanced age category. He's winning in the seniors category. So congratulations to Donald Trump. We did run an based on Trump's, what do you want to call him? I mean, he feels like the real president, to be honest with you, Elon Musk, whatever you want to call him. But we did run a poll. Tesla is seeing some clap back based on Elon's PR woes. The work that he's doing with Doge and some of his comments, some of his performances with Donald Trump. It's been interesting to watch, and this is a story that continues to write itself. Our sympathies to Tesla drivers everywhere. But we did ask Real Talkers. There is obviously a great argument for buying an EV. And none of you should be embarrassed that you have an EV. If it works for you, great. You don't have to explain it to anybody. You don't have to justify your purchase outside your own household. But we did ask back on March 12th, ran a 24-hour poll on X, unofficial, unscientific results. Are you considering an EV for your next vehicle? 871 votes. 47% of you say nah. 37% of you say maybe, but not a Tesla. 10% of you say yes, I am considering one, or I could be convinced. 1 in 10. And 5% of you already drive an EV. So kind of interesting. So 47% absolutely hard no, 37% maybe but not a Tesla, and then let's say 15% either yes or yes I could be convinced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, you just feel it now when you see a Tesla when you're driving, right? Like, I saw the Cybertruck on the highway on Friday when I was doing some errands after work. It was crazy, and I just thought, like, where is this guy parking? like it's got to be underground inside all the time. He's probably got a crazy security system in it and I'm not saying, I think people thought when I said there was a video online of a guy smashing a hammer to see about the bulletproof windows and pulling the fender flares for the tires off of a Cybertruck that I meant he was he was doing that to someone's car. He wasn't. It was his vehicle that he bought. It's a guy on YouTube, millions of views, and he did it on purpose to show, the state of the vehicle. I wasn't saying go out and do this to Teslas. And I see people with Teslas, the lesser models and stuff like that. And I think, hey, that's great. You're going green. You're doing your part. I have nothing against EVs, especially Teslas, but I just, some of the makes of the higher end vehicles, the way they're put together, the standard's not up there, no matter how much they say for it.
Are you rattled by the letter from Jan that we received in the flamethrower on our most recent episode?
No, but I heard it.
Because you and I were called to the car, but we were accused of heaping
Go listen to our
haters onto
Friday.
Tesla owners.
Yeah. But I didn't mean people were out there videotaping, vandalizing Teslas. I meant that someone took a video and did like a whole education on the build quality of the Cybertruck. But, some of the models are built quite well. Some of the models I see out there are cost effective.
I feel bad for the Cybertruck owners. A lot of them waited, they put deposits down, waited like 3-4 years to get them. They're paying, the prices they're paying for them are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I've seen people like 130, 140 G's, maybe more. Erica says, I've got no problem with people boycotting Tesla, but people firebombing Tesla dealerships and attacking Tesla drivers is spectacularly stupid and unacceptable. Erica, I echo your sentiment 100%. Super Chat Ken says EVs are a very particular need in Alberta, in our home province. Says, I looked at one closely, just didn't make sense for me in Alberta with our dealer support, with our infrastructure, and with my low miles driven. Yeah, I mean, charging infrastructure is obviously a big deal. Roy's watching us live on X right now, says he's got a great deal on an EV Chevy Silverado with a 740 kilometer range. Oh, it's interesting. They're making them more and more appealing all the time. Let us know what you think about what you're hearing on the show today. To talk@ryanjesperson.com. We'll keep these conversations continuing. We're kind of on two paths right now, Real Talkers. We've got our protocol, we've got our editorial plan if no election is called, and then we've got kind of a parallel plan. It's like a choose your own adventure. If this election calls, it happens at any moment. I'm with Supriya. I don't think he's doing it from Europe, but my guess is that it could happen on Sunday. That's a guess. Could happen on Sunday. That's the 23rd, which would mean Monday the 24th. A week from today, we'd obviously hit the ground running. In the meantime, as we kick off every week here on the show, courtesy of our friends at Solar by Kuby, we have a chance to shine a light on a story that's just like made our day, or a story that's renewed our faith in humanity, you might say. We harness positive energy. It's called Positive Reflections, proudly presented by Solar by Kuby. And we love this one. We're actually going to go stateside for this edition. This, another audience submission from Gerald. We sure appreciate this. I had no idea what was happening in the state of Wisconsin. I had seen the state invoked in talking about tariffs and trade, but in Wisconsin, lawmakers have been currently debating what's been described as a piece of anti-trans legislation. This is Assembly Bill 104, a legislative proposal that aims to prohibit gender transition medical interventions for individuals under the age of 18 years of age. And just last week, on Wednesday, the Assembly's Committee on Health, Aging, and Long-Term Care legislature hosted a public hearing where members of the public showed up to give testimony both for and against the bill. And according to ACLU Wisconsin, the event went on for over 8 hours, and some people were sitting there like all day waiting to make sure that they could voice their opinions. And one speech, we're going to play it for you here, from one elderly man by the name of Larry, has gone absolutely viral. Okay, so Larry was invited there by friends to speak and support the legislation. And he was waiting in the overflow room for hours to have his moment to speak. And while he was waiting in that overflow room, he was listening to other people have their say. And then it came time for Larry to step up to the mic. And Johnny, let's give it to him. Here's Larry down in Wisconsin.
Larry, I assume, correct? Come on up. You are next. And my understanding is you were in the overflow room?
Yes,
How many more are up there?
quite a few.
Okay, if there are any of them that are going to be testifying, we're getting down there on slips. So if they want to make their way down here, if they plan to speak, I would invite them down here now. So, all right, Larry, the floor is yours. You got 2 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to apologize to you people. I was invited here to give my support for Bill 401. I have very little knowledge of gay people and things like that there. So when I came here, my eyes were open. I was one of the critics that sat on the side and made the decisions. There was only 2 genders. So I got an education that was unbelievable. And I don't know just exactly how to say this, but my perspective for people have changed. So I don't want to take up no more of your time. I'd like to apologize for being here, and I learned a very lot about this group of people.
Oh, hey, could we all stand to be a little bit more like Larry, taking the time to hear people out? He says, I got an education that was unbelievable, and it's changed my perspective on people. Whatever that means for you, however that applies to you, however that may influence your week. Maybe you hear somebody out, maybe you consider another perspective, maybe you seek to understand. Let's all try to be a little bit more like Larry. That's our positive reflection, courtesy of our friends at Solar by Kuby. Thanks for being a part of this show. Thanks for liking us. No, we mean it, really. You like us. You really like us. How about subscribing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and tuning in tomorrow for the next episode of Real Talk. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.